Welcome to our first iteration of Fireside Chats with Four Dragons. My name's Brandon Wilson. I'm the practice lead here at Four Dragons. I'm a certified technical architect of 10 years. I practice mainly in ITOM, CMDB, ITAM space. Today, have a guest with us, Dustin Barre. He's a CMA. I'll let him introduce himself as well.
Yeah, happy to be here. Looking forward to the chat today. As Brandon mentioned, I am a certified master architect on the ServiceNow platform. Also serve as a director in my current role, really focused on strategy, road mapping, and obviously a lot of times that leads into CMDB discussions. So really happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm happy to have you here as well. So, fun fact, Dustin and I have known each other for 10 years and we came into ServiceNow together. So, I'm glad we was able to see each other grow into this ecosystem, do some amazing things for our customers and, become friends, right? So, that's a pretty good experience. But enough about us today, right, Dustin? So, let's get to some of the major factors and why we're here today, why we're going to be talking about some of these things and more importantly, how our customers are dealing with some of these things. We've seen CMDB a lot over the years. We've seen it mature into many different things. We saw it really early on in its infancy state, right? So, like, I think some of these versions, early on was like Dublin that we kind of messed around with, and it was just kind of starting out. But today, it's kind of blossomed into this huge factor, almost the foundation to some of our customers' platforms and foundation to some of the processes that ServiceNow has, implemented over the years. So one of the things I've seen lately, and it's kind of, I won't say disturbing, but in a way, it is I see customers doing re-implementations. And one of those things, and one of the complaints that they see is the CMDB is untrusted. Are you seeing that today with some of your customers? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely one of the biggest pain points, and I'm sure we'll dive into some of the other more common pain points. But the biggest thing is really, a lot of times when I engage with my customers, if it isn't like a net new greenfield environment where we're getting an opportunity to stand up to CMDB, a lot of times it is the biggest pain point, period. And, even if we're going in to do like a CSM implementation, something that you might not think does relate directly to the CMDB, one of the first things that always gets brought up is, hey, our CIs are, you know, we can't really trust the data that's in them. We can't leverage the CMDB. And again, even if the implementation wasn't specifically for that, it's always something that's a recurring pain point for them. And a lot of times when you really do start digging into some of those issues, it really does come back to like a poor implementation to begin with. And we can probably elaborate further into that, but it is really the most common issue that I see with the CMDB.
You're absolutely right. So when we say foundation, right, we talk about two different types of data, right? We talk about the CMDB data coming in with whatever that source is, right? But we also talk about some of the core foundation data, such as like, users, groups, locations, and stuff like that. And again, the CMDB uses those as well. So more importantly, right, like when we say that the CMDB is foundation, right? But from an operationalized way, right? So it has to support CSM, it has to support SecOps, ITSM. But the CMDB is a way that it's the building blocks, in my opinion, right? So
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
when we talk about the building blocks and bringing that data in, what's the pitfall is that I've noticed is that they don't use the tools that are available to them on the platform to make sure that data is accurate or healthy, right? When you talk to these customers, do they have processes around data management?
Yeah. So it's funny. So that's normally one of the biggest issues. Even if there had been another partner in place, or even if they try to do, standing up the CMDB on their own, and maybe they were using ITOM visibility and they went through the process of implementing discovery. A lot of times they might, have this set it and forget it type of mindset to where they set up discovery schedules or initially, or maybe they did like an import of CI data or asset data. And then they think that's going to get them across the finish line or be a really good resource moving forward without having the thought process of, hey, we need like a long-term data manager or data steward. Hey, we need to be managing these processes long-term. And that really is, one of the more common issues is that they just don't have anybody managing the data long-term and they're not revisiting those processes on a daily
Yeah.
basis. So
Yeah, no, I
yeah,
completely agree.
I don't know about you, but that's,
No, it's
something I
governance,
run
right?
into. So
We talk about platform governance, but we don't talk about, data governance, right? So,
yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, a lot of customers I speak to here in the last, month or so, and I ask them like, "What's your process around data management? What's your process for bringing data in, validating the data?" And the answer is always, "I don't have a process."
Yeah, we don't do it. Yes, exactly.
And I'm like, "Okay, so did you think that the CMDB is just going to magically heal itself?" Right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
people think that for a regular implementation like ITSM, right? You could pretty much develop or implement what you need and then forget about it, right? I mean, you don't really have to come back to it unless there's a specific need for it, right?
Yeah.
So, but in the CMDB, it's not that way, right? It's always changing. You got new CIs coming in, you got retiring CIs, and this whole thing. And if you don't have a process in place, then how does the platform going to know that X changed in your environment, right? And then when you deal with different data sources coming in, oh my gosh, I'm like, that's a battle of its own. Like, have you had to deal
Yeah.
with a customer with data? Yeah, yeah. So tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it is funny you bring that up. I wouldn't say that it's in every customer scenario, but it's pretty prevalent in terms of, people having multiple data sources or sources of truth, and they really haven't even established good identification, reconciliation types of
Yes.
roles to begin with. So they have one system that's bringing in CI information, but they have never set up, source of truth roles or trying to ensure that the identification reconciliation rules are in place. So another tool will bring in data for that same CI, but then overwrite the data that the other tool, and it's a never ending loop of
Yep.
poor data and, overwriting that data. So they get into a scenario to where now they just can't trust their data,
Yeah.
which is really
Yep.
kind of like what you started the whole conversation off with. And it's really just some of those very basic foundational things that they just didn't do to begin with. So yeah, I mean, perfect example. We've had customers in the past where they have millions of CIs potentially, and without really starting off on the right foot and really understanding what they need to do to handle that data, you have all of this data that's at your fingertips that you just now can't leverage at all.
Trust me, I know.
Yeah.
I just did almost a 2-day workshop just around CMDB, right? And funny thing, we were just talking about a few weeks ago around doing in-person workshops, right? I just did one, and like that was my first one I've done in years, right?
Yeah, it's
So
been a while for me. Yeah, so
great experience, right? But anyways, but no, we spent almost a day and a half talking about data precedence and why the IRE is so important, right? I mean, if you guys aren't familiar with the IRE, it's identification reconciliation engine, right, of the CMDB. And some of the questions that I was given part of this workshop is like, do we have to go through the IRE? And I was like, I dead out said, yeah, it's not a question. It's you do, yes. So, and they thought it was kind of funny at first, but I'm like, no, this is serious. I'm like, if you're not going through the proper channels to one, go reconcile your data, what's going to happen? You're going to get duplicate records, and then you've probably seen it, Dustin. You're like, yeah, I've said. So you have customers with thousands of duplicate records.
duplicates, yeah. No windows, all of them. Yeah, yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
100%.
So now they're kind of scratching their head. I'm like, how am I going to handle this? How am I going to work through these records and try and choose reconcile these, right? Is there an automated approach? And the short answer is not really, because now you have to kind of go back and work with the teams to figure out what happened, right? So
Yeah. And of course, there are like the deduplication tasks and everything, but a lot of teams aren't even aware of those. So they see that they have all these duplicate CIs in place, but they don't even know how to start to even resolve them. So yeah, it's again, I think really it all points back to just not approaching it the right way to begin with.
yeah.
But yeah, go
100%.
ahead. I didn't mean to get you.
No, you're
Yeah.
fine, man. No, this brings up a good topic too, because manageability of things. We had the we let's say a customer has a process, but in the past, ServiceNow had a poor way of managing data in the CMDB, right? We had that CMDB help dashboard,
Yeah.
and we've seen the three cards, the three C's. We know what those are, but there hasn't been a good way to really manage things. Like you can do the tasks and stuff like that, but visually, like it's not easy. But now, I don't know if you've seen, seen 360 or even a workspace. I don't know how much you kind of, toyed around with it, but I think that's a game changer. I mean, have you worked with it or used it at all?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if I've worked with it as much as you have, but for me, I do talk to my customers about it pretty consistently, especially when they are having these specific issues. And a lot of times, I'm talking to the CIOs or I'm talking to like high level program managers or program owners for the platform just as a whole. And they're always like, hey, how can I get more visibility into these things? And immediately I'm like, hey, let's check this out. So I think the data that it does bring to your fingertips at this point and really being able to view everything in that one single pane of glass, which I'm sure if anybody out there isn't super new to ServiceNow, you've probably heard that single pane of glass terminology before. But a lot of times, again, they're not even aware of that. And then once you do get that into their hands and you really do show them how to utilize it, it really does start to give them that visibility that they were missing previously. So I don't know if you want to share more about it from your perspective, because I know ye actually do work with it very heavily. So
Yeah, I'd love to because, I struggle with it. Again, working with the CMDB for almost 10 years, guys, and it's always been a struggle to manage the data, right? It's actually seeing it at your fingertips, being able to act on it, being able to kind of drill down into different areas, different classes, different CIs, and just have that, again, single pane of glass at your fingertips. And that's what we were missing. The platform's caught up with workspaces on ITSM side of things, CSM side of things, even the employee side of things. But the CMDB was kind of missing link there. But
yeah.
now with the certain, I forget what the release was, but the last couple of releases, they've iterated on the CMDB workspace. And the one thing that really calls out on this is the data manager. Now, the data manager, oh my gosh, you can set up so many different policies around retirements, staleness, duplications, and oh my gosh, you can go on and on. You get really creative with this. And how you dealt with that before the data manager is like business rules or workflows or stuff like that. That was a nightmare, and that was only reserved to for some admin level tasks.
For sure, and I think having that all in the workspace now, and for anybody out there that might not be super familiar with what the workspaces are, it's really just a super user-friendly UI, user experience that makes working within the platform much easier and also much more user-friendly. So, being able to have that functionality now in a workspace that's really approachable from everybody has really been a game changer. So
Yeah, and it kinda delegates some of the tasks, right? So, a
yeah.
lot of these tasks that used to be there was reserved for admin level, right? And you always had to go back to the development team like, "Hey, I need this done, I got that done," right?
Yeah.
Now you can set this down to, like, a CNV manager or even a data manager and delegate some of those down, getting more back into a citizens development type thing, right?
Yeah, which I think, for me is really important, especially when people are trying to scale out their environment, or even if they are starting smaller with their ServiceNow journey, it's still important to be able to identify these process owners and put more power in their hands without them needing to go through the process of, really high level admin types of training like you or I have went through, or a lot of ServiceNow resources have went through, really allowing those people, those teams to focus on more high value types of projects that really they do have the skill set to do. So you're taking out some of those more remedial tasks, giving it to the people that can really own it, and they touch the data every day. So it is really, it's super powerful at this point.
I agree 1000% on that. I've always wanted the power in my hands to do those things, and there was always reserved for those admin level people or those groups, right? And now you give them the power to one not only manage things but have the processes in place to ensure that hey tasks are created and assigned to groups that can actually get these things done, right? That
Yeah, and
that's
I
been
think
that's been the struggle.
and I think too, being able to isolate the training, so you're really giving these teams training and enablement on a very specific part of the platform that's very specific to their job role. It
Yes.
also makes that user adoption, much easier, and you have higher adoption of the platform generally because now they're not needing to intake so much information, learning the platform from an admin perspective. It's really role based or persona based at that point, which makes life a lot easier. So
Yeah, that's a good point, right? So, and kind of turn that a little bit to the other side here. Now they're not getting overwhelmed with other things on the platform, right? And we all get that squirrel syndrome, right? We're like, oh, look at this thing over here, and then we want to go do these things. We have like eight tabs
yeah,
open, right?
that's a good point. Yeah, yeah,
Now you have eight tabs in a workspace.
yeah.
But no, it kind of to your point, it focuses them on the task at hand instead of actually being everywhere on the platform. And maybe if a tab hidden behind another, browser or something like that, it just brings everything into one scope, which is amazing. So, okay, great. Now we talked about kind of the data management side of things, some of the pain points some of the customers are having. Now, let's talk about some of the operational side of things, right? So, you
Yeah.
kind of hinted that at the beginning with, tying data back to ITSM or CSM or HR or even maybe asset management. But we're not going to get into asset management today. That's a whole different topic, right? So,
Sure.
but, explain to me some of the things that our customers are doing that may be, a pitfall, but also I want to hear about some successes that our customers are doing.
From the operational side, I think we probably already kind of I know we were talking about data, but we did kind of touch on the operational side a little bit. I think the pitfalls there are just really not identifying the appropriate people to, own this process long term. But from a success side, once you do get these processes in place, you identify the right individuals that can own these types of processes, really own the data, own the CMDB, you're really now only going to improve other parts of the platform that you plan to use long term. And for me, from a CMA perspective, especially somebody that's really helping organizations strategize on the platform long term and really get value out of their investment, it's really important to do the foundation the right way. So when you do start to get into like the ITSM side or you do start to get into the SecOps side, you can now really understand how your business, how your organization is being impacted when you do have outages or when you do have vulnerabilities or when you do have security incidents. Because now you know that the CIs that are being affected by those outages or being affected by those security risks, that data is accurate, and you also now know what other CIs may be being impacted downstream. So you really do start to get into the service aware CMDB, and I know we're not touching on CSDM today necessarily, but you really can now start to mature out your service model. And sky's the limit. I could probably talk about this forever if you can't tell, but really focusing on that foundation is only going to position you for long-term success on the platform so you can really start to get the value realization out of it and really start to see the benefit of that investment. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I could talk for so on that, but yeah.
Oh, we could. We're getting into some dangerous territory here.
Yeah, yeah.
This might go on for a few hours, but
Yeah, yeah.
you bring up a good point around impact, right? A lot of customers miss this, right? What do they mean by impact, right? So you talk about incident impact. Like if something goes down, that's a reactive approach to it, right? Something that's wrong. Now we can kind of see what is wrong, but also see the impact across the entire organization. But
Exactly. Yeah.
not if you want to change something in the environment, right? So
Yeah.
it kinda goes to that, right? So, being proactive and planning on that would also help decision-making process, right? So, if let me ask you something, like, back in the day when we were working together and we wanted to change something, we just did it, right? And if it broke, right?
Well, I like to think we have more planning than that in place, but yeah, for the most part, I'd say that might be accurate. Yeah.
But that was 10 years ago. We were young then, or youngish, I guess. But anyways, but a lot of people just make changes and they don't put change requests in. But
Yeah.
if we start to enforce the processes that we have to make sure that one, CIs are attached to your change records,
Yep.
you could then run an impact analysis. And then what do you get? You get an understanding of what's the severity of that change and if it's appropriate to do it at that time, right? So think that to me, if people were to follow that, they would see value instantly.
Oh, 100%. And I think that gets into something else that I actually, it's kind of odd. I wasn't really prepared to talk about it, but now that you bring it up, it's such a core part of what we're doing is having a good change management process in place as well, which I don't know how much time you want to spend on that, but to your point, I mean, that really does start to drive just better, accurate processes all around because to your point, now we know what might be affected if we do make this change. And that goes into making sure that you have a good process in place for that too. But yeah,
Yeah.
it all does start. If you can't tell, the CMDB really does start to intertwine with so many other parts of the platform that if you don't have that CMDB foundation right, your change management process might be lacking. Your incident response might be lacking. All of these things downstream will just be impacted negatively.
Oh yeah, and no, we could talk about this all day long.
Yeah,
So it's just
yeah,
like CSDM and other things of the platform that
yeah,
we get really passionate about. We get past that foundation and we start building some walls in this house. It's starting to come together, right? So
yeah.
we'll have different series with this, and we'll talk more about how the CMDB plays into not only just CSDM but also the operational side of things. How does that support that? But also we'll eventually get into some of the things around health of the infrastructure, right? And then tying that back to some of the ITSM processes as well. But I do kind of want to start to wrap this thing up, right? So I do want to, I mean, if you're not prepared, I got some side stories too, but I want to hear some stories that you heard over the years. It could be recent years. I know we've both been working Fen in the last years, and yeah, sometimes that can be unentertaining, but I want to hear some real stories out there. And you don't have to name any names, but I want to get your side of things on what you think.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, one comes to mind immediately. One of the customers I was working with recently, which obviously is in the federal space, I won't throw out which agency it is, but they had kind of touching on how I just mentioned millions of CIs. This was that customer. They had millions of CIs, but almost all of the data was inaccurate. And when I mean all of the data, I really do truthfully mean all of it. Like some of it was accurate, like the names of the CIs were accurate, the IP addresses, but locations were wrong on all of them. So then, you have they did have teams in place to manage and maintain their CIs and their assets, which, kind of go hand in some scenarios, but we'll touch on that later. But they didn't really know how to resolve it. They didn't know what the issue was. They didn't know, like, why are these locations wrong? They have these printers that were in, El Paso, just as an example, but in reality, they were in Virginia, and they didn't
Oh,
understand, like, "Hey, why are all of these printers showing the incorrect location? Why are all these servers showing the incorrect location?" And they're running Discovery, and they think, "Hey, well, Discovery should be identifying this. What's going on?" And it really just comes down to, again, they didn't have the appropriate plan in place when they built out their Discovery schedules. So, the discovery schedules were setting the location, but they didn't know how to identify that. They didn't know what the issue was. And I think, you know, being able to see how it was truly impacting their day-to-day operations, because now they're trying to order, new printers, they're trying to order new servers or configure new ones, but they couldn't really understand like where their current ones were based on, bad data. It really
yeah.
was impacting how they were making orders and procuring new devices and going through the process of onboarding new devices. So, that one small thing of just having incorrect locations on your schedules really had this huge, massive downstream impact that once we resolved that one simple thing, rebuilt those schedules and started to discover, accurately, it immediately fixed all those downstream operational processes. So, and again, this is millions of records. So imagine what that looks like when you're trying to manage that long term. So
So
yeah, and
you were
I
able to
could go on
resolve
there, but
that,
yeah.
and
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
We identify it, we go through the process of rebuilding their schedules. And also, as part of that, when you have so many CIs, you need multiple people to own multiple locations or own multiple networks of devices. So we went through that entire process of helping them kind of reestablish, sound processes, identifying those process owners, rebuilding the schedules. And then, from there, sky's the limit. So, in
wow, okay.
yeah, yeah. So I could go on there, of course, but feel free to share one for yourself or
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I similar issue, right? I mean, I again federal. I've been in federal for as long as you have, really. So,
yeah,
I helped this customer stand up their instance very early on, and we set a very firm foundation. We went down the CSDM route. We did some cool things, right, and operationalized it, and and then I kind of came back. They didn't have any processes in place. What happened is that they didn't trust their data. I asked them, like, "What have you been doing lately? What's your processes? How are you handling certain things?" The answer was, "We haven't." And so we're kinda in that process right now that we're working with them and trying to establish a center of excellence, or, what do they call it? A CMDB control board or something like that, a data control board.
yeah,
Yeah, so that we can get them back up to where they need to be. And they don't wanna do a reimplementation. They wanna fix what they have. And
yeah,
that's the struggle here. But the problem is not the process in the place. They don't have the owner. They don't have the stewards in there to
yeah,
making sure that classes are in place. So I've been working with them to make sure that they have POCs in place so they can go in and validate data. Because since it's been a couple of years, there's a lot of stale records in there that they need to resolve, make sure that, hey, it is truly retired or it's not retired. And that it's a long process. It can be a long process. I'm sure you know, but uh,
Yeah. I will say too, I mean, because both of their scenarios were kind of similar. The one thing that I think was impacted most that maybe goes unmentioned sometimes is really their opinion of the platform. So, they started feeling like they were promised these solutions on the platform that were going to help them with their asset management, with their operations. And then they realized fairly quickly, like, hey, this data is bad, or hey, I can't even do X, Y, or Z on the platform. And from their perspective, they think that the product's failing them. When in
Mhm.
reality, it was just as simple as just working through the process and making sure that their data was accurate and there were
Yeah,
processes behind it. So I do want to mention that because once you do resolve that and now they can use the platform how they thought that they would be able to in the first place, that user adoption and their opinion of the platform changed immediately. And then again,
yeah,
for me, I talk about value all the time, but then the organization can now see that immediate value gain where they had been missing it for so long. So that's like
yeah.
one of those other, I think, under-mentioned impacts sometimes is how are your employees, how are your end users actually viewing the platform? So,
Good point. And I'm sure you've seen this like this triangle at sometimes that people, process, technology.
yeah,
Is it
yeah,
definitely not always the technology. It's sometimes the process, but sometimes it's the people too, right? So technology can't solve process problems. It can't solve people problems, right? So
definitely.
it's just a band-aid until you've actually have those processes or the right people in the room, right? So it's a good point. And a lot of people don't focus on that enough. I know during my workshop I did that last week was we did focus on people process technology really hard to make sure that the people understood that, hey, you need these people in here and in place to make sure we're championing these things and making
Oh,
sure
there you
these
go.
changes get done and
Yeah.
enforcing your policies, right? Because if you don't have these people doing these things, what's going to happen? You're going to end up back in these same seats again.
Yeah,
So,
keyword change champions. I'm glad that you mentioned that.
yeah,
Yeah. We won't get too into
yeah.
that, but that is very
Let's
important,
not get
Jason.
into CM
Yeah.
tournament. That's right.
Yeah.
That's a fire topic right there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But no, I think we brought up some very excellent points and some good, really good ones. And I'm glad we can kind of work in some of these customer stories, right? And, I hope it resonates with some of the customers listening in or watching us and during this time. So, Dustin, anything you want to touch on before we kind of wrap things up?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I said it earlier, but ServiceNow is an extremely powerful platform. And I think the key thing that really gets missed that we really did hit on today is the foundational side of the platform that a lot of time goes unnoticed, doesn't really get discussed enough. And I think ensuring that, whether you're working with Brandon and Four Dragons or some other partner out there, ensuring that you start with the foundation. And if you've already had the platform for a while and you've been working within it for a year or 2 years and you're really feeling like you're struggling, circle back to the foundational piece and really spend time and spend quality effort in getting that foundation where it needs to be. And the sky will be the limit for you on the platform. So I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, you nailed it right there. Spending the time asking the questions, right? And I think that's key. And ask yourself if you're the product owner or you're the administering the platform. Ask that question: are we using the platform the way we should be using it? Are we doing the things that we need to be doing, right?
Yeah.
And if you answer no to any of those questions, then you need to take a step back and really think about what you should be doing, right? And get those people in the room that you need to have in the room to have those conversations. So I'm not gonna say they're gonna be easy conversations to be had, but they're conversations that need to be had, right? So
Definitely.
awesome. Perfect. Well, we're going to wrap this session up, this very first session of Four Dragons Fireside Chats. We're going to try to have these once a month, and maybe we'll invite Dustin back. Who knows, right? So,
Yeah, if you don't
I
get tired of hearing from me, yeah.
right, right, right. So, no, I think you did an excellent job, Dustin. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy man being a CMA and all, right? So, but I'm glad to have you here and, by my side these last 10 years. So, thanks again for everything. So, other than that, we're gonna say goodbye today, and I wish everybody a wonderful evening. So take care, everyone.